All right, everybody, get ready for a wild ride today because we are diving into some serious mob history.
That's right.
We're talking family feuds gone very wrong, hits, and a whole lot more.
Yeah, this is a deep dive into the Colombo crime family.
Yeah, and specifically their civil war that went down in the 90s. I mean, these guys were going at each other's throats, and it really gives you a look at how these organizations can just tear themselves apart.
And they're often more vulnerable to internal conflicts than external pressures, you know?
That's true. And it's funny, you think with a name like the Colombo family that they'd be a little more, familial. But this story is anything but.
Right. When we say family in this context, we're talking about a criminal enterprise.
Exactly. So for those who don't know, the Colombos, they're one of the 5 families that have historically controlled organized crime in New York City. And they'd already been through a couple of these internal wars before, like who could forget Crazy Joe Gallo back in the day?
Oh, yeah, Crazy Joe. That was a whole different era.
But this time, it was different. Their boss, Carmine Persico, the guy in charge, he was already behind bars serving a life sentence. You'd think that'd leave a power vacuum, but it's almost like it made things even more chaotic.
Absolutely, because Persico, even from prison, was still trying to control things from the inside. He was grooming his son, Little Al Persico, to take the reins, but that rubbed some people the wrong way.
Okay, so even from prison, he's playing puppet master with the family.
Pretty much, and that's where Victor Arena comes in. He was a powerful captain in the family, very ambitious, and he saw an opportunity with Little Al being, well, relatively inexperienced.
So he's like the classic ambitious underboss, just waiting for his moment.
You could say that. And he had a lot of support. So things really start heating up. You've got Persico pulling strings from prison, Little Al trying to assert himself, and Arena making his move for power.
And that's got to be a recipe for disaster, right? So how does this all spiral out of control? Who throws the first punch, so to speak?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment, but violence escalates quickly. And there's one guy who's really at the center of it all, Greg Scarpa.
Ah, Scarpa. I've heard that name before. Wasn't he like Persico's top enforcer or something?
That's putting it mildly. Scarpa was ruthless, efficient, and completely loyal to Carmine Persico. He was involved in countless murders, extortion, you name it.
So he's the muscle, the guy you call when you need something messy taken care of.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really wild. Scarpa was also an FBI informant.
Wait, what? Seriously? He was whacking guys for the mob, and at the same time, he's got the FBI on speed dial.
It sounds crazy, right? But that was Scarpa. He played both sides, feeding information to the feds while carrying out hits for the Colombos. And what's even crazier is that the FBI might have overlooked some of his activities to keep him as an informant.
Wow. Talk about a morally gray area. So you've got this incredibly violent internal war brewing, and then you've got Scarpa, this wild card who's playing both sides. And it gets even more complicated, right? Because this is when John Gotti, the Dapper Don himself, gets involved.
Right. Gotti, the head of the Gambinos, another one of the 5 families, he sees an opportunity in all of this chaos. He decides to back Arena's bid for power.
I bet he did. So it's not even just a family affair anymore. Other families are getting pulled into this.
Exactly. Gotti backing Arena throws gasoline on the fire. It makes the whole situation impossible to ignore, even for a powerful family like the Colombos. And things just get bloodier and more unpredictable.
This whole thing is crazy. So we're talking about a full-blown mob war here, right? How many people are we talking about? Like, what's the body count at this point?
It was a bloodbath. Dozens of people were killed. Not just mobsters, but innocent bystanders, too. Anyone who got caught in the crossfire was fair game. It was a really dark time.
It's easy to forget that there are real victims in these kinds of things. It's not all just, pinstripe suits and sit-downs like in the movies. So how does this all end? Who comes out on top?
Well, in a way, nobody really wins. By the early 90s, the feds had cracked down hard. Arena, he's put away for life. And Scarpa, well, his double life catches up with him in a way no one could have predicted. He contracts AIDS from a blood transfusion and dies in prison.
Wow. So even the guy who seemed to be playing both sides, he ends up a casualty of this whole thing.
Exactly. And the Colombos, while they technically won the war by taking out Arena and his faction, they were severely weakened. The family was decimated. They lost a lot of good men, and their reputation was in tatters.
So they might have survived, but at what cost, right? It's like they tore themselves apart from the inside.
Precisely. And their decline really marked a turning point in the Mafia's influence. The old order was changing, and the Colombo War was a sign of that.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, here we are, decades later, and the world's a different place. But organized crime, It's still around, just maybe not in the same way. So what do you think? Has the world of organized crime really changed all that much? Or are we just seeing a different side of the same coin?
Oh, that's a question for another deep
You
dive.
got that right.